Hello, and welcome to the Mature Living Podcast. I'm Riley Runnells, editor of Mature Living, and each month we will be interviewing someone in the community who is making a difference or has a unique story to tell. Okay, I am here with Ann. Hi, Ann. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Riley. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, we have to tell our readers that we were so inspired because we got an email from you talking a little bit about your story and about your book and your podcast and all the incredible things that you're doing in the community. And we were so excited to feature you and get to know you a little bit more. So I want to start by going all the way back and talking about how you grew up. So I know your father was in the military, and so you and your family moved around a lot. So talk a little bit about that experience.
My dad was in the Navy, and I went to 9 schools in 12 years.
Wow.
And that sounds tough, but there were many wonderful things that happened because of that. I think by the time I was grown, I never felt afraid of a new situation. And I also learned that if one school didn't work too well, the next one might.
Yeah, for sure.
So to move on if something doesn't work real well.
Mm-hmm.
There are better things ahead. The other thing, there were some disadvantages too. I have memories of a lot of kids in different places, but I never saw any of those kids change. So kids that I knew 60 years ago are still 14 years old or 15 years old.
Right.
So there are disadvantages too. But I have learned to appreciate the advantages of moving from place to place and learning to meet new people and deal with new experiences.
For sure. And that seems to be another theme of your work and your life, is trying to find the positive side of things and learn from these experiences rather than dwell on them. And I think that that's really inspiring too. So talk to me a little bit about your path from once you got through all of your schooling, you decided to go to Florida State University. So tell me a little bit about what you studied and why you chose that university.
Well, I picked Florida State because it was close to where we were living. We were in Jacksonville, Florida, and I hadn't planned to go to college until I was about a sophomore in high school. And I told my mother I thought I would like to go to college and I thought I was going to be a psychologist, but that changed. And she did not have any education beyond high school. And did not know much about college. And she said, if you can figure out how to do that, I will support you.
Awesome.
And so she did not have a lot of money, but she sent me part of what she had every month. And also, I worked during the summers. And so I was accepted. I went to Florida State, and I was going to major in psychology, but at the end of my freshman year, a friend came and she said, Florida State's having this great new program. We can be exchange students with the University of Massachusetts for a semester. Same tuition, everything.
Oh, wow.
She didn't want to go by herself. She wanted me to go with her. And she said, there's only one catch. You have to be an education major. So I switched my major.
Oh, cool.
Thought I would switch back when I came home, but I really liked the teaching line of things. I liked the idea of being a teacher. And I stayed in the teaching program when I came back to Florida State. And it was one of the happiest things I think I ever did.
That's incredible. I love that. Yeah. And you said you worked too to put yourself through college. Tell me about what jobs you worked to do that before you started at university.
Oh, I did anything I could find. I think I worked the summer after I graduated from high school. I worked at the police station. They had records that they needed to have typed up. We were still typing in those days. And then I didn't want to go back and do that the next year. And so I started knocking on doors. Couldn't find a job. And on my way back home, I passed the road to the paper mill. So I drove out to the paper mill, and it just so happened they needed someone to fill in for people on vacation. So I did.
I love that.
And then went up to the University of Massachusetts, and someone told me that she had worked for a summer as a chambermaid at a dude ranch in Massachusetts. And so I thought, well, horseback riding, swimming. So I applied to be a chambermaid at a dude ranch. And it was the worst thing I ever did.
Oh, no.
Yes, it was terrible. I think I went horseback riding once. swimming maybe once, and the work was very hard, and there were no hours. It was sun up till sometimes 11 at night.
Oh, man.
So you learn, not everything's going to be great.
Right.
And then I had joined, Florida State University still has a student circus.
Mm-hmm.
We have to try out for that now, but you don't have to try out. You didn't have to try out for it back when I did it.
Yeah.
You just walked onto the lot and you asked somebody to teach you the easiest thing there. But they also work at Callaway Gardens every summer. The Florida State Circus has like a day camp program, and they perform in the afternoons and evenings. And so I did that the summer I graduated. And well, the end of summer came and I needed a job.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody told me they needed a 6th grade teacher in LaGrange, Georgia, about 17 miles up the road. I got a ride up there and applied for that. And so I taught in LaGrange, Georgia for a year.
Awesome. And that was right after you finished school?
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. And so it's interesting to me. I was curious about your former jobs just because I didn't know if you had any experience prior to entering the education field with education. Did you have any siblings or anything that you were able to kind of work on teaching life lessons or things like that?
Not really. I have a younger brother. He's 2 years younger than I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really didn't have any teaching experience. I taught Sunday school a couple of times.
Yeah.
But the year that I taught in LaGrange, Georgia, really opened my eyes to what you could do with kids.
Yeah.
It was wonderful, except there were some very hard things in there too.
Right.
We had one young man that threw kerosene on his Christmas tree before he put it at the curb, and he was severely burned.
Oh, no.
And he survived, but I taught him at home the rest of the school year.
Wow.
And the school next to us also, it burned the first week of school. The other elementary school burned.
Oh, wow.
And so we shared our building with them, which meant we went in extra early. We left early in the afternoon. They came in. So we shared our building and our classrooms.
That's a harrowing experience for a first-year teacher.
Yes, it was a baptism by fire. But the children were amazing.
Yeah.
They were just amazing. And I knew that I did not want to stay in a small town the rest of my life. And so I applied for the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
And they called and said they were interested in sending me to Liberia. Would I be interested in going to Liberia?
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea where Liberia was, but I said absolutely. And then I looked up Liberia the next day in the school library. So those were the early days of the Peace Corps. I think they train Peace Corps volunteers in country now.
Okay.
You go live with a family and you're trained there.
Mm-hmm.
They actually trained our group in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
For Liberia.
And what was that like for you? I mean, you didn't even know where Liberia was. What was it like for you to enter into that, knowing that you're going to be moving countries?
Well, by then I was used to just going into new situations, and I just always went in. Well, I'm really a very much an introvert. I go into any situation and I stay very quiet, and I look around, and then I make connections slowly. I don't just jump in and take over anything. So I think that's the way I went into Liberia. They put me in an apartment with 2 girls who'd been there a year. And so they were able to help me, show me what to do. And I had a 5th grade classroom in downtown Monrovia, Liberia, the capital city. It was a very small room, 20-some kids, and no rows between the desks. You had to climb in and out.
Oh.
But it was good. It was good.
Yeah.
Not always easy, but good.
What was your biggest takeaway from your experience working in Liberia in the Peace Corps?
Honestly, that I would never complain about anything again.
Yeah.
And I made that a conscious decision when I came home. I will never complain about anything again. I haven't kept to that. I complain sometimes.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. But you just see what other people contend with. And I think that may have been one of the biggest benefits of Peace Corps.
Yeah.
It really opened young people's eyes to what we have here.
Yeah, you definitely gain perspective from that experience.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you went to Liberia. How long did you stay total?
Well, we went in the summer of 1965. And Jim and I had gotten to know each other a little bit in training, and we were dating back and forth, and he was in a village up country.
So you actually met Jim, who went on to be your husband, in San Francisco during the training.
Yes.
I love that. That's awesome.
So we were dating by the time we got to Liberia. And we got married in the summer of 1966. And there were tons of Peace Corps weddings. I mean, we were like 150 volunteers. We were, for the most part, single. We'd all graduated from college. We all had basically the same values, or we wouldn't have been there.
Right.
So, after a while, there were maybe 2 or 3 weddings, sometimes each week.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So we were married in the summer of 1966, and I moved up country with Jim. He was teaching in a town called Ganta, and we taught school there. And we were going to take a delayed honeymoon to the Canary Islands at Christmas.
Yeah.
So we had passage booked on a ship and everything, and we had to leave from the village and go down and catch the boat in Monrovia. And he said, I haven't been feeling too well. Let's stop in at the Peace Corps doc's office. So we went in, and he was in the doctor's office a long time. And the doctor came out, and he said, your husband has a very severe case of hepatitis.
Oh, no.
Didn't you notice? Well, no, I was in love. I didn't notice.
Right.
He looked fine to me.
Yeah.
But he said even his eyeballs were yellow. And so they put him in a clinic there over Christmas. That was our first Christmas. And they couldn't really take care of him in the clinic. They weren't equipped for that. And so the doctor traveled with us back to Baltimore, and they put Jim in the public health hospital there.
Gotcha.
And he was there until about the 3rd week in February. I stayed at the Y, explored Baltimore, and then I took him home. We got on a plane, went to Jacksonville, and he met my family for the first time.
Wow.
And then we got back on the plane. We went up, and I met all of his relatives in Grand Rapids, Michigan. That's where he was from.
What a whirlwind first couple months of marriage.
Yes.
That's insane.
Yes, things got better from there.
Right. I was going to say, I thought it was unique that you got married while you were still serving in the Peace Corps, let alone that you had to delay your honeymoon further and further. Did you ever get to go on the honeymoon?
No, we never did. But, after a while, other things are more important. And
of
we
course.
did take several nice trips.
That's good.
So I really, after a while, I don't think either one of us wanted to go to the Canary Islands then.
Right.
So we just did other things.
So
it was okay.
After you met his family, what made you end up settling in Indiana?
Well, while Jim was in the hospital in Baltimore, he really didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. He had a degree in philosophy because, well, for lots of reasons. But anyway, nobody really knocks on your door and say, you got any philosophy majors here?
Right.
Nobody does that. So he decided he needed to do something else. And I was visiting him in the hospital one day, and a young man was leaving. And he said, that's the social worker here. He said, I wouldn't mind doing what he's doing. And Jim went back to school after we came home, and he got a master's in social work. And we had to go to Indiana because he had a grant from the state of Indiana that gave him a stipend each month for going to school.
Yeah.
The only catch was you had to come and live and work in Indiana at a state hospital for 2 years to pay back the grant.
Right.
So we looked at a map, And we could have chosen almost any place in Indiana, but my parents lived in Florida. So we looked at the map and we said, how far can we get so we'll be closer to Florida?
Yeah.
And it was Evansville, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
So based on how far south can we get, we spent the next 35 years in Evansville.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's very clear that you hold family as such a value above so many things, which
We
is
really do.
it's beautiful. And I love that. But I want to talk about too, after the Peace Corps, you talked about what Jim started to do, but tell me about what you started to do. You've worn many hats in your lifetime. I mean, being a middle grade reading teacher, a youth minister, a college counselor. Tell me about all the different hats that you wore.
Well, I think of life, at least my life, like a patchwork.
Mhm.
You look at what's in front of you and you choose the next best thing.
Yes.
And so I think that's what I did. We had our oldest son while he was in grad school.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had our older daughter a few months after we moved to Evansville. We moved to Evansville in June. She was born in September.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I had 2 kids. And I wanted to just be there for them.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I was at home, and he was a social worker. He'd go to work, come home, very 50s kind of lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But then when the kids got a little older, I found a good babysitter, a woman that took care of kids in her home on the next street over. And so I would go to, I think it was about the time my son was in kindergarten,
Mm-hmm.
I started subbing.
Yeah.
And so I subbed when it was convenient. And I did that for the next 12 years. In the first year that he went to college, I began teaching full time. And I had taught some full time before
Mm-hmm.
Jim and I got married, and for a year after we got married.
Yeah.
So I just did what was next, sort
Yeah.
of.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that's good because, it teaches you not to just pigeonhole yourself into one thing, but rather
Right.
keep looking forward to, what else am I good at? What else am I
Yes.
interested in?
And it
And I
was
love
always,
that.
what can I do that won't cost my family too much?
Right.
I want to be there for my family. And we had some foster kids. We had 3 teenage girls for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
And we had, after Saigon fell, we had a young man for a year,
Mm-hmm.
a boy about 12 years old. And I still have contact with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And he is in Philadelphia. He has 4 boys of his own, and he's a grandfather now.
Mm-hmm.
And then after he left, I'd always thought of our family, and I think Jim had too, as having 4 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we adopted our youngest. We had a son after our daughter, Chris. And then we adopted our youngest. She's from Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And I just always tried to, if I wanted to work outside the home, I tried to work around what my family needs were.
And I want to talk about the fact that you have been a writer throughout every single hat that you've worn in your life. I
Yes.
feel like that has also always been an underlying passion
Yes.
that's blossomed out. So tell me about your writing. You've, written not only your whole life, but you've written columns, books. Tell me kind of what inspired you to start writing and why you've continued it for so long.
I always wanted to write. I think from the time I was about 7 years old. I wrote a terrible poem, about 3 lines, had to ask my mother how to spell some of the words. But it was just like, you can make things up.
Yeah.
And then they make sense. So I did that, and I always thought I'd like to be a writer. And then when I was about 13 or 14, there was a newspaper contest for teens to write about something. I can't even remember what now. But I entered, and I won 2nd place.
Oh,
And
wow.
I thought, this is not too hard.
Yeah.
And so I always wanted to write. And then while the kids were little, I began writing this story that was just published this year. And it's been through a lot of revisions. I would write it. I would think it was pretty good. I would send it away. It would come back, and I'd look at it, and I'd think, no, that's not that good. And so a year or two later, I'd drag it out and write it again. And I wrote some articles when the kids were young, and they were published, a few of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've written things that have never been published and probably never should be published. And then the kids were getting older, and I thought I would like to write, but we were taking care of my mom and dad by then.
Mm-hmm.
They lived in a house just down the block from us. And so it was taking a lot of our time.
Yeah.
We really couldn't go out. And then my mother came to live with us the last year of her life. And so Jim just one day said, we have to do something together.
Yeah.
And he wanted to contact the editor at the Catholic paper in Evansville. He said, why don't we write 3 or 4 columns about what we're going through and see if Paul will print them in the Message.
Yeah.
Well, we did. We wrote 4 columns. And by then, I have all these ideas. I said, we're going to write these columns. We're going to give presentations, and then we're going to have a book. He says, why don't we just write a few columns first?
Let's start small.
Yes. Well, Paul liked them, and he hired us to do a column a week, and he paid us. Not a huge sum, but he paid us.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
That's such a gratifying feeling as a writer, to be paid for your work.
It really is. And I've written a lot for nothing,
Yeah, of course.
where I didn't get paid. But it was just wonderful, and it was $50 a column. But that was a huge sum to me, and that was $200 a month, $2,400 a year.
Yeah.
That I could just spend any way I thought I needed to spend it.
Of course.
So we did that, and after our first full year of columns, Paul entered some of the columns for the Catholic Media Association. It was Catholic Press Association then. It is a national organization for the U.S. and Canada. And our little column won first place in its area.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we won a first place award. And we kept writing. We wrote for 14 years, column every week. We never missed a deadline. And it was more than 700 columns.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yes, 1 column a week for that many years. And the good thing about that is I really began to feel I was developing as a writer. I learned how to write tight. We had 500 words a week, and 500 words a week to tell some kind of little slice of life family story with a faith twist. So you learn to watch your words.
Yeah, of course.
It was great training. And in 2011, we moved. We had been living in Bellevue by then. We moved over here. And I thought I had said, and I wrote most of the columns, but he would edit and he would write a column now and then too. But I thought we had said everything we could possibly say. And so we stopped in 2011.
Yeah.
But by then we had won 2 first place awards and some second place, a third place, and, honorable mention, some of those.
That's amazing.
But it said to me, I needed to pursue this one way or the other. Well, we had a lot of family tragedy between 2011 and last year. In 2011, our son-in-law was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And they live in Los Angeles. They lived in Los Angeles. And we flew back and forth a lot to help our daughter. She's a musician, and she had to travel just to support them.
Yeah.
So they needed somebody to come in sometimes. So we did that. And he passed away in 2014. In 2015, I had uterine cancer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It was caught at stage 1.
That's
no
great.
chemo, no nothing.
Yeah.
But anyway, surgery. And then in 2016, another tumor in the parotid gland, very early, no chemo. I've never had chemo. And that was 2016, and in 2007, now by 2015, Jim was already showing signs of Alzheimer's. Lots of little things that we would just kind of brush off or just say we're getting older, but we were just covering.
Yeah.
In 2017, right after Labor Day, Katie called me from California, and she had cancer. And it was bad,
Yeah.
but she recovered. But it was back and forth to California again to be there for her. And her oncologist said she made a remarkable recovery.
Wow.
And she is in full swing as a musician again. She spent 3 weeks performing in Europe this summer.
That's incredible.
Yeah. You'll have to look her up. I'll tell you her name.
I will. I love that.
So, good things happen too. That was 2017 and 18. And early in 2018, Jim was diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
It had gotten really bad. When we went out to California in 2017, I realized he could no longer navigate an airport.
Yeah.
He didn't know what to do once we got through security, couldn't read the signs. I had to make sure if he went to the restroom, he could see me when he came out. So 2017 to 2023, we dealt with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And then he passed away November 25th last year. But by then he had no idea who I was, had trouble even feeding himself. It was just, how
it's
Alzheimer's.
Awful.
Yeah.
To watch someone go through that, and especially someone so close to you.
Yes.
But I do want to ask you too. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit throughout the podcast, but religion has been a theme throughout your life. It's been something that I would imagine is an anchor for you in your faith. So tell me kind of about how you used your faith to guide you through such a tumultuous time.
Well, especially with my upbringing, I think, I look at everything in this life as a temporary situation. Mm-hmm. Nothing is permanent. And I've had my faith since I was young.
Yeah.
I remember a little country church, and I was about 7 years old, and the pastor said something about anybody wanting to go to heaven. Come down front. Give your life to Jesus. Well, I didn't ask anybody. I went down front. So I've considered myself a Christian since then. But, you grow. And there was a time in college when I really didn't want to go to church.
Yeah.
Really just didn't want to do anything with that. Well, here's a funny story. My dad wasn't a churchgoer, and there was conflict in our house because Mom was and he wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so in my Baptist faith, we speak very frankly to God. Mm-hmm. And so I said, Lord, I want a husband I can go to church with. Mm-hmm. And that was probably when I was a junior in college. And in those days, the 60s, you still kind of looked around for a husband at college. Mm-hmm. Well, no husband showed up for me, and I graduated. And as I was graduating, I thought, this will not do. And so I upped the ante for God. I said, Lord, being a Baptist, I said, Lord, if you will send me just the right man, I will take him even if he's Catholic.
And let me guess.
Yes.
Jim was Catholic.
Oh, yes. And I was impressed by him because he was in this little upcountry village. Mm-hmm. And the only Catholic church was about 20 miles down the road. I found out, this is while we were dating, I found out from somebody else that he was hitchhiking through the bush on Sundays, 20 miles to get to that Catholic church.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And hitchhiking up country means you might get there, you might not. Means you might not have a way back. Mm-hmm. You might have to spend the night there with people you don't know.
Right.
But he was doing that because of his faith. And then we began to get more serious. Mm-hmm. And I thought, God laughed when I said that about I will take him even if he's Catholic. Mm-hmm. And so we fell in love. And yes, I did take him, even though he was Catholic. And I didn't understand much about the Catholic faith. There weren't any classes to go to or anything like that. But when I became a Catholic, I just asked God to show me how to serve as a Catholic.
Yeah.
And there have been some wonderful ministries. I was director of a vacation Bible school, and that was a very Protestant thing at the time. A friend and I brought that in, but I did that for many years. I have been a youth minister, director of religious education, and then I was director of RCIA. And RCIA is a group for people who think they are interested in the Catholic faith. So I did that. It's just been patchwork, one thing after the other.
Yeah. I love that. I love it. And it's clear. I mean, you even talking to me right now, I'm seeing the tapestry of your life unfold. It's beautiful. And I want to talk to, you went through such a long period of hardships. But I think one of the beautiful things that came out of that was your book. So I want you to talk about your book and what it means to you to be able to publish this work that you were so connected with your husband through.
Thank you. Well, by 2019 or 20, COVID came along, and we were absolutely homebound like everybody else. But with Jim's situation, I knew we were going to be homebound for as long as the journey took. And even in 2014, I began to ask myself, especially I think people ask themselves this when they realize how limited life is. And I began to ask myself, what do you really want to do with the rest of your life? And I really wanted to go back and see that that book was published. So I really began working on it in 2014. And it was a godsend because Jim's needs were increasing, but he also slept some. And I had time when I could write. So I did that. I worked on it, and I took it to a couple of places. I don't know if you've heard of the Highlights Foundation, the Highlights children's books. Highlights magazine that you see in doctor's offices and places. I'm not sure they have the magazine anymore, but they have a wonderful writer's retreat in Pennsylvania, not too far from New York City. It's in the hills in the farm country. And they have tons of classes. They've got online classes now too. And so I went to a writer's retreat in 2017, and my son and his family took care of Jim during that time. But in 2017, I got myself on a plane and went over there. And it was about 5 days, and you got your own cabin. And they have gourmet meals.
Oh, wow.
It was amazing. The speakers were terrific. And I gave my little book to Cynthia Leidig Smith. She was very encouraging, and she suggested changes, and then she said, make the changes we've suggested and shop this around. It's publishable.
Wow.
So I came back, and I made the changes, sent it out. It wasn't publishable yet, but it was getting closer.
Yeah.
And so about 2 years ago, I couldn't leave to go to any conferences. I went to a Zoom conference and met an editor, and I sent her another book I have. They didn't take it. They almost took the second book, but then I had this book, and I sent this one to them, and they did take it.
Amazing.
And so after 40 some years, here's my book.
Wow.
Yeah. Never give up. Never give up.
It's incredible to see something in so long in the making. Talk a little bit too. I mean, tell the listeners about the book, what they can expect to read in there, where they can purchase it, all of that.
Oh, thank you. Okay, it's called Ride a Summer Wind, and it has more of a Baptist flavor than my Catholic years that I've spent in the Catholic Church now, but I've got another one for the Catholic Church later. But this is called Ride a Summer Wind, and 13-year-old Buddy McBride is dumped on her grandfather's porch by her mother when she was about 6 years old. She's never seen the mother since. But her grandfather is a maker of stringed instruments. He makes beautiful banjos and mandolins, and he's a wonderful musician, and he teaches her to play. So by the time she's 13, she has agreed to be in a talent show with another girl that's kind of turned up on her doorstep as a friend. And the day that she is going to play in the talent show, she takes a gift for her teacher. It's just an old vase from their kitchen shelf, dirty, full of unpaid bills. They have no money. And she gives this vase to the teacher, and she comes home that afternoon, and the old man is absolutely furious. He says, "You have no idea what you've done."
Oh, no.
Yes. And so she is just dumbfounded. It was just a dirty old vase. Well, he doesn't tell her what she's done. He kind of says, as he's taking her into the talent show, just before he leaves her at the stage entrance, he says, "It's all right. You're worth more than all the vases in the world."
Oh, how sweet.
So she goes in, and she and her friend place second in the talent contest. And then a day or two later, that vase is stolen from her teacher.
Oh, no.
And she and her friends, once they find out why it's valuable, are determined to get it back. And they spend a summer of high adventure tracking this thief in the vase.
Wow.
And the main thing at the end is, will she have the courage to try to save the life of the thief who's tried to kill her?
Oh, no. That's a really, really cool concept. That's wonderful. And tell me too, you have a couple of books, correct? So tell me about all of the books that you have published.
Okay, another book that Jim and I published together in 2005 was published by Liguori Press. They're a Catholic publisher, good traditional publisher. And I was a youth minister at the time, and I was having a really bad day. And I thought there must be something else I can do. So I sent them a little self-published collection of our columns. And they wrote back and they said, "We'd like to publish a book of these, but of different columns, not the ones you sent us, but do you have more?" And of course I had more. So I sent them another collection, and they published that. I think it actually came out in 2006. So, and I think you can still get it for a very small price from Liguori. But I have a quantity of those that I'll take around and sell with this book too. And Write a Summer Wind is available from Elk Lake Publishing. They are my publisher, and they've been wonderful to work with. And it's also available on Amazon. And I think those are the only two places now. And I will sell them when I do presentations.
Yeah.
And I have another book that I'm hoping I can submit and maybe have it sold by next year. And it's the first book in a trilogy. And it's very, very different from Summer Wind. I got an idea for this book in 2017 before anybody talked about a pandemic. And it's about two orphans in the far distant future caught in a pandemic that causes blindness and then death.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the older of the two siblings is the boy, and he has a younger sister. Their parents have both been taken by this terrible disease. And they get a book from an aunt in a distant place. It's really an old Bible, but she's written clues. She's an herbalist. She's written clues for a cure for the pandemic in this book. If they can get from the little village where they are to a big town down the road and find someone with the initials PB, they can solve the cure.
Wow.
And of course, there are all kinds of people after them.
Of course.
Yes.
There have to be obstacles, or else it wouldn't be a good book.
Yes.
I love that. That's amazing. And we are hopeful and we'll be excited to see that get published.
I will let you know if it
Mature.
is. I will let you know if it is.
So, one of the ways that you've used your writing to connect with people is through varying author programs at different community libraries. So can you talk a little bit about those programs and what you offer?
Yes, the first program we had was right here at Grounds for Thought, where we are today. And there's a lot of bluegrass music in the book. My daughter came from California, and I have two friends here in town who are musicians. And so it was a very easygoing. I wanted to have a book party. I didn't want to have a book launch. And I just wanted to have prizes. I wanted it to be fun.
Yeah.
So we had music, and then in between the music, I would say a little something about the book, why I wrote it, who it's dedicated to. It's actually dedicated to all the grandparents who are raising grandchildren alone.
Oh, that's beautiful.
There's so many. I forget how many. It's in the front of the book. But a lot of grandparents, they don't have resources to raise another child.
Right.
And they have health issues, but they step up to the plate determined to keep the kids with them until they're grown. And it's a struggle. So I wanted to talk about that. Anyway, we had a wonderful night here. And I gave a program at church. I've given 2 programs at the senior center, and I'm going to give a third. The first one was about podcasting for seniors. Mm-hmm. And then the second one, this last Friday, we actually recorded a podcast.
Oh, awesome.
And then November 6th, I'm going to have an author presentation on the book.
Cool.
And I think it's maybe September 28th. A friend and I are going to go to Bellevue Library for their author fair.
Yeah.
And then October 12th, we're going to be at the Wood County Library.
Man, you are all over. Well, I love it. I love the grassroots marketing too. I think that is really, really incredible.
Well, it's something I can do. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think especially at the age I am now, there are many things I can't do, but we always have to look at what we can do.
Yeah.
And if you look at what can I do, there's always something.
Absolutely.
So.
And you mentioned it earlier, but outside of your writing, you also are a wonderful podcaster. So I'm, going to need you to rate my podcasting skills after this.
No.
But I want to talk about your podcast, Speeding Past 80. So tell me about kind of the inspiration for that, the purpose of it, and what you're hoping to achieve by continuing to publish episodes.
Oh, thank you. Okay. When I was 79, I could see the 80th year coming. Mm-hmm. And Jim and I were homebound, and it was kind of the end of COVID. Mm-hmm. There would be no fancy trips, no cruises, no nothing for the 80th birthday. And I thought it's the what can I do thing again. And my son, Chris, was teaching podcasting. He's a professor at BGSU.
Awesome.
And so he was teaching podcasting. He's in communications. Mm-hmm. And so one day I said, Chris, I would like to have a podcast if you could do the tech stuff. And he agreed. God bless him. He
That's
just agreed.
Wonderful.
Maybe he thought it'd only last 3 episodes. I don't know. But anyway, he agreed, and I started writing little stories. I think at first I used some of those 700 columns, mm-hmm. But then I started writing new stuff, and I started interviewing other authors too. And he comes over and sets up the computer in a back bedroom. And I sit in a chair. He points at me, and I say my little 4 to 10 minute story, mm-hmm. whatever I've written for that episode. He records it, takes it home, edits it, and posts it.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. And he's done that. I think we're on about the 110th episode.
Wow.
So he has done that for every single episode, never complained.
What a good son.
Yes. Yes, he is a very good son.
And I think it speaks to the accessibility element too, because there are a lot of people who might be visually impaired who want to kind of hear your stories but might not have a great way to do that. And so reading them aloud on a podcast is a wonderful idea. I think that's great.
And it didn't seem like it would be much of a podcast if it was only 4 to 10 minutes. But I found that a lot of people like the shorter story. Yeah. And I did it as a way to connect with other people. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to say something about life and faith at this age at 80. But what I have found is it's become an extraordinary connection for me with other people. In fact, I just wrote him a letter today, a friend in Kenya, mm-hmm. because of the podcast. I have a friend in Japan, Netherlands, Canada. Can't think of anything else right now. But anyway, and friends that are distant family members that I had little connection with. I have just enjoyed connecting with people through this. Yeah. And after a few years, they are friends,
Right.
even if I never see them. At one point, I started interviewing authors, and one author was especially encouraging, Glynis Nellis. She writes for Zondervan and some other places too, and she's written like 40 picture books or something. But she is a wonderful person to interview, and I was telling her I finally got my book published, and she said, "That's wonderful." She said, "I will endorse it." And she said,
wonderful.
"I know people and they will endorse it when I ask them to." And that had been a big problem for me. I didn't know anybody with a publishing name that would endorse my book. She found wonderful endorsements. And so, you reach out to people and you encourage them, and then sometimes it comes right back to you.
It's a testament to the power of connection.
Yes, it is.
And we've talked a lot on this podcast about you connecting with people and using your work to connect with people. We've talked about your faith and your connection to that. We've talked about the relationships that you've built with your family. I want to know, what legacy do you hope that you and your work will leave behind?
At this point in life, and I think a lot of people find it, or they come to this conclusion, the only thing that really matters is that people know they're loved.
Yeah.
And I really hope that my family, my listeners, my friends, I hope that when they're with me and when they're not with me, I hope that they know that they are loved. That's all. It all comes down to that.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. And, we like to end the podcast on a little upbeat and exciting note. So I have a couple of fun questions for you.
Okay.
So first, to get to know you a little better, what is the last book that you read or one that you're reading right now?
The last book I read was a series called The Wing Feather Saga. And it's middle grade reading. I still read middle grade books for fun.
So do I. They're wonderful.
Yes. Well, the Wing Feather Saga has Christian themes. It's not overtly Christian, but it's a dystopian kind of thing. Anyway, it sold like 1 million copies.
Wow.
And I read that when I was recovering from hip replacement surgery. Couldn't do much, but I read this saga, and it was just fun.
Yeah, I love that. And what music do you like to listen to?
I like to listen to 60s music. Give me the Beatles or Elton John or anything like that.
I'm partial to Elton John myself.
Yes.
Tell me what your favorite movie or television show is.
Okay. You won't know this movie, but I absolutely loved it. Have you ever heard of The Gods Must Be Crazy? Well, they use some of the tribe's people in Africa.
Yes. I've seen that movie. I watched that in one of my sociology classes in college.
Did you really?
Yes,
No kidding.
I love that movie.
I do too, because it absolutely brought back Africa to me. I mean, it was so real. One of them has the guy that's the biologist, and he's kind of a loner, but he gets all flummoxed when the girl comes along. And we knew characters like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And tell me some of your hobbies or special interests that you have outside of your work.
I'm trying to be a gardener, but it's not going very well. The deer have eaten everything. And even if they don't eat stuff, I forget to water, or, the weeds start to grow.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be a gardener, but I have work to do in that area.
I am definitely someone with a brown thumb, not a green thumb.
And I like to I love to read. I collect cookbooks, sort of. But then I really don't make many of the recipes. I'll make some of them. I just mostly like to read about recipes.
Yeah. I understand that. I'm not a great chef myself, but I do enjoy learning different recipes.
Yes.
That I could hypothetically make one day.
Yes, you could. Yes.
Tell me the qualities that you value and those that you associate with.
Joy. I love joyful people. Life is too short to just be doom and gloom. And I love trustworthiness.
Yeah.
I love authenticity. You can be the weirdest person in the world, but if you're authentic, you're one of my people.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. And tell me, outside of your own podcast, do you have a favorite podcast that you listen to?
You know, I had never really listened to a podcast before I started mine, and I'm not really listening to podcasts now, though I keep thinking I know one. Paula Chamberlain, The Quilter's Life.
Oh, okay.
She has a great podcast. She interviews quilters all over the world. I think she interviewed one from South America. She interviewed one that was 101 years old. And I think she's been doing this for about 5 years. She does podcasts from quilt shows. If you have any interest in quilting, you have to listen to her.
I love that. That's awesome. And finally, I want to ask, if you could give your childhood self any piece of advice or encouragement, what would you say?
Learn to write faster. And no matter what happens, in the end, it will be okay.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so happy to talk with you. Thank you. I was so happy you would come and do this with me.
Of course.
Yes.
We want to thank you for listening. Make sure to check out Mature Living magazine in print and online, as well as all of the publications under Adams Street Publishing, including the Toledo City Paper, Toledo Area Parent, Ann Arbor Family, Current, and Findlay Living. Find us on social media or connect with us if you have any story ideas to share.